Hey up! How are we doing? How's everybody's Saturday going? I need to pop open the chat. Yeah, lovely to see everyone. It's a beautiful day. I've got my cup of tea. This mat keeps sticking to the bottom of it. Take his little hat off. Got a nice cup of Earl Grey cream. Oh, oh, nothing nicer, is there? Well, there is, but anyway, it's a family show. So yeah, lovely to see so many people here. Let's do the usual hellos and welcomes. So first one in was Suzanne, who said, "Love this topic. I can relate to it." So there is going to be a topic tonight for a bit of a discussion. It's a month since we last had one, and the feedback was really, really positive, and people were saying, "Oh, can you do this more often?" So it's not necessarily going to be like every month, but just when kind of a question pops into my head where I think it's worth exploring, then maybe we'll do it. And then we've got the lovely Caroline. Hi, Caroline. And Ramon. Hi, Ramon. We have Lily Rose and Alessandra, Sarah, and Dawn. Hi, Dawn. We've got the lovely Kim. Hi, Kim. And we have Marilyn. Nice to see you. Beautiful day in Michigan. Elspeth. David's here. Hi, David. And Red Wing. Nice to see you. We've also got Vanessa. Hi, Vanessa. And our Cheryl's here. Hi, Cheryl. How are you doing? Oh, Ramon's having some peach flavored black tea. That sounds really nice. Peach flavored black tea. Wow. Vanessa's refilling her coffee cup. We've got Moran. Hi, Moran. Nice to see you. And Deanne's here. Hi, Deanne. Lovely to see you too. Lily Rose. Hello. Is that the? It looks like, but it's tiny on here, but it looks like the tour with the Aurora Borealis behind it, which we saw this week. Well, I didn't know anything about it till after the event, so I was in the land of Nod. Am I missing anybody? Let's have a look. Steph. Hi, Steph. Nice to see you. Patsy's here. Hi, Patsy. How are you doing? We have Hypnopol. Nice to see you. And Saskia's here. And Trisha. Hi, Trisha. Lexi. Hello, Lexi. We have Esco. Barbara, the lovely Barbara. Nice to see you. And Karen. Hi, Karen. We also have Giselle. Hello, Giselle. Lovely to see you. Hope you're doing okay. We also have Thace. Hi, Thace. And Paper Moon. Hello. Don't want to miss anyone. Taro Nut. Nice to see you. Out on a Limb Life, who's also Helen. I'll have to try and remember that. Helen. Nice to see you. Welcome. Forever Whereafter. Hello from New York. Warm weather is here. I know it feels like we had some warm weather last weekend, but then we paid for it with torrential rain and storms, and so we had a flood warning this week. Isabel. Hi, Isabel. Karen, I think I said you, but if I didn't, hello and welcome. And yes, it's a borrow. I borrowed the photo. Yeah, I saw the photos of the tour. I sent one to Sandra saying, "Oh, can you imagine having if we were there when that was on the Northern Lights? I would have climbed that tour in the dark to see that. I can tell you. Can you imagine seeing the Aurora Borealis from the top of the tour? Wow." So anyway, yeah, how's everybody doing? So have you all got a cuppa? I've got, like I say, I've got my tea. ready. Has everybody had a good week? What's been happening? There was still twilight at 11 p.m. last night. Wow. Well, we are coming fastly approaching, aren't we? Looking at my watch that I didn't put on today. Fastly approaching, we're only a month away from the shortest night of the year. I enjoyed it. I love the idea and the way it was brought the cards to life. I'm not sure what that's in relation to. Malamia's here as well. Hello, Malamia. Busy week, but actually made some money. That's always a bonus. So yeah, Earl Grey tea for Thace. Cup of white wine, says David. That's nice. Oh, where's Moran? Because she says mates a change from Manchester. Oh, mates a change on Manchester because it's lovely weather. Yeah, weather. Oh, Giselle's on the bubbles. Oh, apparently another Aurora Borealis is coming in 2 weeks' time. Wow. Kat is drinking iced coffee. I did have an iced coffee in the week. If you saw my videos this week, and I know there's been a lot of videos to watch from this channel in the last couple of weeks, but if you saw the one, it was a really lovely day like this, and I just fancied a cold coffee, so that's what I did. Plain strong coffee for Malamia. Pepsi Max for Karen. We missed the aurora here too. I didn't realise till we saw the photos. Tried to see it next day, but it was clouded over. Exactly the same. I woke up. Was it Friday night to Saturday? I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah, because we talked about it last week on the live. I just woke up, put my phone on, and there was just a plethora. Almost everybody was posting pictures on my timeline of the aurora borealis, and I just thought, I didn't even know this was happening. Oh, you have champagne, Giselle. So yeah, so I missed out on it completely. Read your comment about feeling excluded, Simon. I wish there was more representation of us elders in cards and in the media in general. We live in a very ageist society. We do. I agree. You only have to look at, particularly in like pop culture. So somebody like Madonna, because she's in her 60s now, the way she is written about is disgusting. You know, nobody takes into account her talent, you know, the fact that she's had longevity for 40 years. It's all really, and a lot of it is written by other women as well, but it's really, really cruel because she's a certain age. She should give up, behave, dress a certain way, act a certain way, and it's just, I just don't get it, you know. But then she has the last laugh. You know, she did a free concert on a beach a couple of weeks ago in Brazil, and to an audience of 1.6 million people. 1.6 million people turned up to watch her perform. So yeah, but yeah, people like, I do feel that there's always somebody to discriminate against, you know. What's happening in this country to trans people at the moment, and the rhetoric is vile. You know, it's really disheartening. I'm hearing that same language that was used 30 years ago about gay and lesbian people. So or whether it's people now with red hair or overweight, there's always somebody that's got to be ripped apart. And it reminds me of, you know, the animal kingdom, where, you know, chickens in particular, if there's one chicken in the coop that's got an imperfection, the rest will peck it to death because they can't stand that imperfection, or there's something different about it. But then you get Canadian geese that fly in a V formation to protect those that are around them. And if one gets injured or tired and flies down, 2 others will fly down to sit with it till it either gets well again or passes away, you know. And the fact that the one at the front will take the brunt of the wind, but then fly to the back and they all take a turn, that's teamwork. Well, that was my card of the day, it was teamwork. But yeah, so we tend to, you know, sometimes we are like Canadian geese and other times we're like chickens. But where does one find a prince? This is the truth. There's more frogs, Giselle, than there are princes. You're lucky you found a prince. I'm surprised no one ever did a deck of the Twilight Zone. I guess it's because every episode was an individual story, wasn't it? Without having kind of central characters. Hey up, Chris. Nice to see you. How you doing? So yeah, anyway, I can't keep up now. We've already talked about cheap red. That must be wine. So there's a few people on the wine tonight and a few people on the fizz. I found a king of cups, little bro. There you are. You found a king. You bypassed the prince, straight for a king. I feel excluded as my body shape is rarely shown. As a larger lady, I know there are pictures of those of my size, but never my shape. Always a different, more hourglass curvy, which I'm not. Yeah, I get that as well. I could understand that. Yeah. Sandra says, I know I'm 52 and just had my hair coloured bright red. Good for you. And why shouldn't you? Why should age even factor into that? Moran's a proper northerner now. 1 pint of Strongbow and I'm hammered. That's not being a proper northerner. I don't see myself reflected in decks. Impossible to represent everybody's life experience. But I do like tarot to represent the human experience, which involves aging different cultures. Okay, so let's start that discussion then, because I think we're going there already, which is fine. So if you remember how Simon Asks works, it's just making sure I copied the link, ready to put it in. It's totally up to you. If you want to come in and have your say, it's a bit like a radio call in where people can ring in and have their say. You can drop in and have your say. Or if you're not comfortable with doing that, then obviously you can have your say in the comments, and I'll try and look out for them as well. It does get a little bit harder to look at the comments whilst having a guest on, but the conversation is between yourselves as well. So if you saw the description on the video that I put out, as I was reflecting, I should say, on something today as I reviewed another deck that made me feel excluded. So the deck that I'm talking about was the one I showed earlier, which is Self-Sorcery Oracle. Now, I loved the images, and I showed the Wisdom Keeper card, and the images are quite reminiscent of that for me. And I made the mistake years ago of buying the book, thinking I was getting something different, but it's just a bigger version of the guidebook that you get with the box. But I hadn't pulled it out for a long time, so I used it today because I didn't feel that this deck represented any males at all. It's very female centric, and that's not necessarily a problem, but it got me thinking as to why I felt the way I did, because I was a little bit irked. And a few weeks ago, I showed the Traveller's Tarot, or the Traveller Tarot. Cheryl will know what it's called, because we looked at it together in a spotlight video. And that really irked me, because it definitely excluded me. It spoke to women, and it was for women. And yet I have no issues at all with decks that have a strong feminine energy, because, everything's about balance, and all of us have masculine and feminine traits and energies, or however you want. Adventure Tarot, thank you. However you want to kind of phrase that. And in my home, it's about balance. My sacred space is about having that balance between divine masculine, divine feminine. But when a deck sets out to kind of just target one group, and I remember feeling this about the Weaver's Oracle, which I regret giving it away, but I was enraged because the language in the book was talking to you, dear sister, and when that language is used and it's excluding men, then it's limiting its audience. Now, I do take on board that for eons, it's been a very male dominated world, and I don't condone that in any way. But what I want, and what I've always been about, is about equality, so that everybody is equal. And you could argue that, well, it's just readdressing the imbalance, if there was an imbalance. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. So if you want to, put comments in, or come and join me. The prompts, well, not really prompts, but I'll get it open here, because I made some notes as I was preparing for this, and I was thinking, well, why is it important for people to see themselves in the deck? And I tried to put just a few bullets. I've got 5 bullets that kind of will shape the discussion. If I can find it, here we go, banners. So the subject is, do we need to see ourselves in our decks? And if so, why? Why do we need to? So the 5 that I thought about is, the first one is that personal connection. And I've made some notes. So I just feel that, if I'll give an example of a deck sometimes that so I identify with a few marginalized or underrepresented groups, the LGBTQ plus community, somebody with a physical and neurodiverse disability, somebody is of a certain age now. So we can all identify somebody overweight, with that sort of being part of a smaller demographic. So if I see, for instance, the Lovers has an option for a same-sex couple, I don't necessarily think that's needed. We must have it. And I think that's because I've had 30 years, no, nearly 40 years, gosh, with the tarot that didn't have it, that I've either got used to it and just conditioned by it. But at the same time, when I see it, I think, oh, that's nice. That's really nice that there's options. I'd like to see it more for the Two of Cups more than the Lovers. But anyway, that's something that I think, is it needed, or is it just nice to see it? But that personal connection, for me, can help make a deeper connection with the cards. And if you've got a deeper connection with the cards, then obviously your own intuition, or your own sort of emotional engagement, oh, there's a thumbs up, emotional engagement is present during readings. So that's one. The second one was around obviously inclusivity and representation. And the reason why I think it's important that tarot reflects different identities from various backgrounds, and people then feel seen and acknowledged, it's because it brings them into a sense of belonging within the community, this community. And that's why, if you go to the Hermit's Cave Facebook group, the rules and the pinned post is about a safe space for everybody, no matter what your background, because having the community where you feel that you belong to something, I think is key. It's so important. The third one is about empowerment and validation. So having yourself represented in the tarot empowers and validates your experiences. So that helps to foster things like self-acceptance, but also gives you a sense of confidence because you've got that sense of belonging and you feel that you're connected to something. The fourth one was about enhancing interpretation, really. I think if people can see themselves in the imagery within decks, then it becomes more relatable, and then you start to get more nuanced, kind of nuanced interpretation of the card. So, for example, if I'm reading for somebody who, because generally I will use the RWS, but if somebody wants a particular deck or identifies with a particular group, and I can bring that deck along that would help them to feel more included, then those conversations are going to be more relevant and meaningful and more nuanced, if that makes sense. And then the last one is about cultural relevance, because and we've talked about this within the community. This is not a new conversation, but having that broader range of human experience, whether you identify or not. Some people say, well, I don't need to see myself in the tarot, and that's fine. That's valid for you. But I know that when I've bought decks, and there'll be members of a community that I'm not part of, then it opens up a world, doesn't it? It opens up by experiencing and having an insight into certain belief systems or certain cultural references, that broader range of human experience. So that's the 5 prompts. I'm just going to pop that back, pop the chats back open, and I will pop in a link just in case anybody, and there's no obligation, even if it's just me sat here and listening to your comments, then that's okay too. I don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable in any way. So I'm just going to have a look at what you have been saying, see if there's anything. Pat said, I've just had my 57th birthday, and because of allergies, I can't dye my hair or wear makeup. It's hard in this age of everything being how you look. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure, isn't there, on people to look a certain way, particularly with social media and the Instagram generation of selfies and looking a certain way. It's interesting that you feel that as well, because my views were always like, God, it must be so hard growing up today, having to try and fit in and constantly be under pressure to look a certain way. But it's interesting, isn't it, how we're all feeling it, perhaps. Sandra says, I always feel I can't come on YouTube without makeup on. We've had that conversation, and I always say to you, don't I, Sandra, you look fine. That day when Sandra was here last and she did her first live, it was almost complete panic. Sorry about that. It was almost like complete panic because, sorry, just ignore Gran's hatch out there. It's so hot, I've had to have the window open, but that does mean the noise of the city. Yeah, so Sandra's like, I got my I need to go and put my makeup on. And I get it, because it's about confidence as well sometimes. If you look a certain way, then sometimes that aids confidence. Agree. Part of the human experience is that feminine and masculine exists in everybody. I don't like all femme or all masculine in decks. Yeah, no, I agree. And even one deck that often gets used or mentioned. If we just reach it, the divine masculine. Now, I was what they call a super backer. So I do get mentioned in this deck on one of the cards for being this super backer. And at the time, I backed it and really wanted it to do well at Kickstarter, because I wanted to. I thought, this is a deck that you don't see very often. I see lots of divine feminine decks, but not divine masculine. But what I love about this deck is it doesn't exclude females at all, or any gender, really, as you'll see with this deck. It's representative because it's talking about divine masculine, you know. So you'll see in this card, it has females. I mean, it is top heavy on male energies, but there are females in this deck. So, you know, and it's a wonderful deck, but it often gets, or not so much now, but when it first came out, you know, there was comments made about it being an all male deck, but that isn't the case. Okay, so where did I get up to? Crystal Louise said, I've grown to appreciate femme-only decks, but generally I prefer binary represented, and grown fond of decks with many genders as well. So I've got Becca coming, but I don't know if she's appearing. So I'm just going to add, see if she appears, but it's just a white screen at the moment, so she might be having difficulties. Yeah, she is. So, but we do have somebody else. So let me change the background, because we want a plain background before I do this. We've got Cheryl.
Sorry, I was just fixing my hair after everyone talking about the hair.
Did you want to just mute your volume and then on me anyway, and then I think you've done it.
Yeah, no, I have my phone on.
Yeah, so what's your thoughts?
Well, you know, I'm multicultural. I'm Trinidadian, Scottish, Irish. So, you know, I obviously grew up in the 70s when Black people had the same impact now that what trans were getting. But also, obviously, I'm a woman of a certain age as well. You know, so I'm a bit older, so that doesn't get represented a lot. But sometimes when it does, it feels too deliberate. Like, I know there was a lot of comments on the Ehrenberg Tarot about how white it was, but you know, that was a deck about its perspective rather than about who was actually featured in it. But sometimes when people might get offended by this, but sometimes when it's some white, blonde, middle-class woman making a deck, she's never going to be able to represent me in any shape or format. You know, coming from a working class background, being, you know, coming from a family of immigrants, you know, having a very different upbringing to a lot of people. So I don't want it to feel contrived.
Mm.
So we are gonna like try and make it inclusive to everyone. Then it can't be contrived. It's got to have input. Like I don't usually like male and female decks. I've got one that I really enjoy, which is that one, the Hattie one. But then you'll see things like Carl Gray's Angels and Ancestors, where there's a load of cultural appropriation in it, and he hasn't got a clue about the stories behind those symbols that he's putting. So if you are going to do it, it's got to be very well researched, and it's got to feel like it comes from a genuine place, not just because you're trying to fit a box.
Yeah.
And I think at the moment, too many decorators are trying to fit a box by putting everything in. It's one of the reasons why, unpopular opinion, but I don't like Unfolding Path, because it's too try hard.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and I think we've gone on a bit of a journey over the last few years, haven't we? Where when we first started to see, and there was one publishing house in particular that got a lot of stick about 5-6 years ago, because there would be that tokenistic approach to feel almost like, well, I've ticked that box, I've been inclusive. But I guess true inclusivity is representing your worldview. So I would, perhaps prefer someone to be really genuine and say, this is the world that I inhabit. So I am bringing to the world of tarot my lived experiences. Okay.
That's what I want to see in a deck. I don't want to see you trying to live my experiences. And I think that's what sometimes happens, because people of color, people of different genders, people of different sexualities, age, race, whatever, you're not going to be able to speak for everyone. Yeah. So we should allow those people to have the voice. I like it, when I'm looking at a deck, I don't necessarily see color and gender and that anyway. I see the energy, and because I was brought up on 1JJ Swiss and RWS, we never even thought about it then. And we don't go, oh, it's a white page when we're looking at an RWS. We're just reading the cards and what the cards mean and what the energy of that card is, rather than looking at what the color of the page is. Or thinking, is he gay? Is he?
Yeah. Yeah, because there's two things. I mean, Poppy Palin's Everyday Enchantment, I spoke to her about this at the time, because it was the first time I'd seen somebody with learning difficulties appearing in a deck, but she was talking about the place that she's lived in England. She's lived in areas that was very white, but then she also originally came from Birkenhead. And she'd expect, and she said, it's the everyday enchantment. It's my everyday.
Yeah.
So she knew people with learning difficulties. She knew people without limbs. She knew people of various cultures. So she shared her story, and it was one deck for me that just felt really natural. It wasn't trying to tickle.
Yeah, because it's come from a personal place, hasn't it? And I think now when you've got so many people creating decks, like just the artists rather than tarot people, and that's fine. I'm all up for that, because I love a bit of, I like a nice artistic deck. But when they try, it's almost like they've got a list in front of them going, right, well, I need to make sure that I need to get this, and include this. Yeah. It's the, like the Fifth Spirit Tarot, it served its purpose and it came from that place.
Absolutely.
And it was completely genuine, and even this might hurt, it included disabilities and different colors, but that felt natural. It felt like she'd met these people. And when you read a book, it was who she'd based the cards on. Whereas when most people are creating it, they just, like I say, the Unfolding Path, felt like it was ticking boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the flip side, the other point I wanted to make about, because I'm the same as you, it was 1JJ Swiss, and then later it was RWS. I never gave it a second thought, but then that's why would I suppose. But I then have to think that, particularly London has always been a diverse city, right from the establishment of London. for people from the West Indies, and so maybe for those years when we only had things like 1JJ and RWS, did those people feel excluded? I can't answer that. I don't know, but did they look at that and think, oh, I can't really, I'd love to see.
Where I grew up in Liverpool, I grew up in Toxteth, and my granddad was like one of the first black immigrants into the city, and obviously married a white woman, and there was a lot of racism going back and forth to them. People putting notes through the door offering to buy the house, and my nan went and filled it up with people who were coming off the boats. But it was it was my granddad that introduced me to the metaphysical side of life. And he used to have an RWS. It never bothered him.
Right.
It was like that's just what he had. My life was I was surrounded by black immigrants coming. As I grew up, everyone was someone who'd come off a boat. Birkenhead did used to be very white, and when I lived in Birkenhead, my mum was one of the only black people there.
Wow.
And there was a massive National Front thing going on at the time as well. So people had been to primary school were still like, white power.
So I suppose that's more kind of like the Wirral side of it, but then over the Mersey.
Over Liverpool. Well, no, Liverpool used to be very, very white. Very white. It was like only in come to the end of the war that it started becoming black, and that's when the first immigrants started coming over. It used to be a very white middle class area, Toxteth, and then it's no longer is. It's very multicultural, very multiracial. I would find that they weren't very open to people of different sexualities.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking of my lifetime, because obviously my well, not obviously, but my auntie from Liverpool married a Nigerian man, ended up going to Nigeria, and my cousins are from that area, and also back in the 80s, again only teenage years, it had a thriving gay scene in Liverpool.
Yeah, it did. Well, we had Holly Johnson and Pete Burns and everything going, didn't we?
Yeah.
But that's another thing, isn't it? If we're going to, like if we're talking just on the way of the color of people's skins, everyone, like you'll find sometimes like you get a white creator who just thinks everyone who's black has the same culture.
Yeah.
Which they don't. Like a Trinidadian culture is very different to a Jamaican culture and very different to a Zimbabwean or a Nigerian culture. So if you're going to do it, you can't really just encompass it by going, oh, well, I put a black person in. Because you're not really showing their culture, you're just ticking a box. And I think it's the same with genders as well. I mean, how do you do it? And, how do you do it without feeling like people are, you're just doing it for the sake of selling your deck?
And I think that's why I go back to, or stand by my earlier comment, that I think that creators, and I'd love for a deck creator to be here. I wish Anna was here like she was last time, because I'd love to get a perspective of whether they do feel under pressure, or but my earlier point stands where I think I would have more respect for a deck creator to share a true, authentic, they're bringing a deck into the world. They're sharing their world with us. So I'd love it to be genuine. I'd love it to be of their experiences. So you mentioned the fifth spirit. That was that person's experience.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if you look at Anna's decks, you see Anna in her decks. It's like a replication. It's a tool coming from her. And I just think that I think we need to take the pressure off the creators, because I think sometimes they do it because we are pressurizing them.
Yeah.
Allow them to create that deck through natural spirit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And like that natural energy that's coming out of them, rather than going to be commercial, you have to do this. Because surely that's kind of taken away from the tarot essence as well, where we're just looking at it as a commercial viable thing rather than the spiritual tool it is. See, it's said the same. On Moran.
But yeah, you know, I mean, Urban Tarot is one of my favorite. Robin, the creator, you know, who transitioned, but you just look into that window, that world of New York where they're from, you know, and you see their life experiences in that deck. Now I'm going, you know, at some point this year, but I've never been there. But I can still get a glimpse of that world, and I can appreciate it, and I can look at the similarities between that city and my city, or that city and London, you know, and the experiences that I've got. And that goes back to,
but you can tell when someone's had life experiences when they create a deck.
Yeah.
You know,
but that goes back to the point of the fifth point, which was cultural relevance. You know, having diverse imaging tarot deck acknowledges and reflects different cultures and traditions and perspectives, enriching the practice by incorporating a broader range of human experiences. But I still maintain that the only person it can bring that is the person with those experiences. We can enjoy it, you know, we can be part of it and learn. That's what we do as humans, to learn about other people and their lives. And I guess that touches on what you spoke about earlier about cultural appropriation as well, because sometimes it can go horribly wrong.
Yeah. Are you doing it because you've actually been and immersed yourself in that world for a little bit? I'm not saying that you have to live there for years before you can put it in a deck. You know, have you been to see that culture? Have you lived that culture for even a couple of days?
Yeah.
You know, so it's
Yeah, I always see myself in every deck, except for the kids' tarot, because Satan was missing in the kids' tarot.
But yeah, well, that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah. Thank you for popping in, Cheryl.
It's all right. I'm going to go back to my sofa now and watch it back on the TV.
See you in a bit.
See you later. Bye.
Hey up.
Hey up. I don't know what was wrong before. I didn't realise I was blank, but it wouldn't be the first time I was a blank space. So.
Well, I saw it there for a good few minutes, and I was thinking, she'll appear any minute, because we get a little thumbnail, don't we, when we use StreamYard at the bottom. This little thumbnail, and I could normally see Becca getting ready, and then it was just a white screen. So I was thinking, well, either that's facing a wall and she's not sat down yet. So let's have
I don't know what happened, but anyway, I redid the process, and it took me to the right place. So but it's really, really interesting subject, and it's, you know, it's so broad, isn't it? The amount of things that this subject encompasses, but I can only come at it from my perspective. And one of the things that always strikes me when I see a deck where somebody with a disability is represented, it doesn't matter what that disability is, the fact that they're there is important to me, and I'll tell you why. I developed really aggressive scoliosis when I was just a baby, about 6 months old, and I was in a brace that came right up underneath my neck, right up the back here, and right across here. And for any child, whether that's a little girl, little boy, whatever, being different is traumatic. This was in the 70s as well, so there wasn't the voice for disabled people like there is today. But I can remember feeling so different and so excluded from everybody else that it was painful. I didn't stop wearing my brace until I was 19 years old. Now, at that particular time, there was nobody in my school that had a disability, a visible disability. Nobody, not one in this whole comprehensive school. And then somebody introduced me to a scoliosis support group where, you know, I thought, wow, this has opened up. There's other people like me in this world, because it can feel very small. So I'm thinking of somebody now that's coming into the tarot, maybe, that doesn't know all the ins and outs of how the tarot deck designing works and who's behind the creation of that particular deck. But when they pick that up and they see somebody in a wheelchair or somebody with some other obvious challenge, it can mean so much. And for me, I don't care whether it's somebody that's in a wheelchair or whether it's somebody that is an amputee, or in one of my favourite decks, a Sacred Sisterhood, there's a woman in there represented that's had with a mastectomy scar. The impact that has when you look at something and you see yourself, not necessarily because you have that same disability, but because that's acknowledged, that is there, that you're not invisible, that you're not, somebody hasn't just created a deck with able-bodied people. And I can imagine, I don't know, and this might be very, very wrong, but I can imagine a person of colour, when they see a person of colour represented, whether that is within a certain culture or not, if they see that person, a person of colour, it's going to mean the world to them at that particular time.
It's about belonging, isn't it?
Yeah. It is about belonging. And for all of my childhood and most of my teenage years, I didn't feel like I belonged because I was different. And if I'd have picked up a tarot deck back then and flipped through it and thought, wow, you know, there's somebody with a wheelchair. And in that instant, you're not alone. You're heard, you're seen. So I mean, that's my perspective, and I can only come at it from my.
Yeah, I think as well, because you and I both, you know, belong to the same community, although different experiences, obviously.
Yeah.
But I can remember the first time I saw on TV as a very young teenager. I think I was about 13. You know, a member of my community being represented in a soap opera, and just thinking, oh my gosh, you know, because all of a sudden you've gone from trying to almost shrink and hide away to like, wow, that there's other people, you know, I belong somewhere. I haven't figured out where yet. And I think it's very similar when, you know, as you've just described, we love tarot, and they're a tool that you know, we use all the time. And as much as I'll always love the RWS, I do get that little kind of buzz where I think, wow, you know, there's somebody being seen, you know. They've got a disability, they're being seen, or you know, there's a same-sex couple or whatever. Maybe the world's changing, and
that I find important too. I love it when a deck creator puts in alternative cards for, just say, the Lovers in particular, because that seems to be the main one. Although some people say that the Two of Cups is like the real lovers card, but the lovers. And I really enjoy when there's same-sex couples in there, because I can actually pick my card and put it in the deck. Because again, for a lot of people, and it, you know, you and I come from a religious background as well. You know, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. So when you can't, you know, you get to the lovers card and it's right, man and woman, and you look at the plethora of decks that there are out there that is represented in. So it's refreshing then when artists come along and they say, okay, not everybody is gay, not everybody is a lesbian, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to include a card, so if they are, they can put that into their deck.
And I know it obviously pushes the price up by having more cards to produce, but I do think that people would pay a few pounds more for those options, because again, you know, there's a deck that came out, I think it was called Modern Love or something like that, where the lovers cards was 2 women, which I thought brilliant, but I really can't identify with that.
Yeah.
You know? And they obviously made a conscious decision under this umbrella of modern love, and I got it. But wouldn't it have been lovely, because then just to have 3 lovers cards, or, you know, 4, whatever, just so you can change things. And I can't remember.
But then, until that point when we reach that, that's how, and that's not going back that many years since this has started to be included. That is how we felt with every single deck we picked up. Can't identify with that card. You know, every deck, man and woman, man and woman, man and woman. So now we've got creators that are putting those extra cards in on that one hand, but then we've also got other people saying, oh, we don't need to see that. It's the tarot is non-gendered, but we're very visual, and when you see the representation in the RWS, it is a man and woman. It's also very Adam and Eve. The whole drawing is like very Adam and Eve. So yeah, you when I see images like that, not only does it take me back to feeling invisible, but also it takes me back to that time when I felt or was told it was wrong.
I felt even more excluded.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. Totally get it. And that's why, you know, when I first worked out what my life path card was, and it was the lovers, I went, oh no. I so wanted it to be the hermit.
Yeah. I know.
Trying to redo the sums different ways to get a different outcome, but it is what it is. But yeah, it's the energy of it, I suppose. But I totally, and thank you for coming on and sharing your
welcome
story as well.
You're welcome, and I shall carry on listening and enjoying the rest of Cuppa.
All right, see you in a bit.
See you later.
Bye. So just before I bring in the next guest who's waiting in the wings, I just want to acknowledge some comments from everybody in the chat. So Tricia said, I do think there's a lot of pressure on deck creators to fit all these communities into their decks. But if that's not something they've lived themselves, it shouldn't be forced on them to represent it. And then goes on to say, otherwise it just feels forced and not genuine. And I think you can pick up on that energy through the cards. Yeah, and I agree. I think that's what a few of us have said as well. Sandra, in relation to what Becca was saying, said there's a girl in my school that had muscular dystrophy and the kids were so cruel to her. Yeah, there's nothing, not many people worse than kids for, again, singling out those kind of differences and highlighting them and treating them differently because of them. Schools can be a terrible place. And then Moran says, completely agree, Tricia. That's how I feel with the old Unfolding Path Tarot. I know that deck's been mentioned a few times. And I kind of get what people are saying about it. Hypnopole says, I think an artist does not have to experience something in order to represent it and be able to do it well. Okay. I guess the only thing I'd say then is, as long as the research is done, if they've not lived the experience and they still want to represent it, then the research needs to be done. Patsy said, I'd like to see more ages in tarot instead of all young and beautiful, and many who add age make them look really old and hag-like, nothing in between. Yeah, I mean, I was talking about this deck earlier, which kind of prompted me to have this thought about, okay, I'm miffed by this, but why am I? And that's where this came from. Why am I miffed by it? Why is it important? But there was somebody in there that was older, but it just looked like all they'd done was change the hair color to white. But then you could say that's the art style. But okay. Kate says, I always feel an artist or writer need to write or paint what they know from their experience in order to be genuine, and at least with a project like the tarot, which is a labor of love. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Adam and Steve. Callum's laughing at Adam and Steve. What happens when you have a deck with lots of diverse reputation, but the cards that are pulled for reading don't reflect the querent? And that's why I think, like when I was talking earlier, I think it's really important that you select a deck. Now, I generally use the RWS just because that's the most familiar deck for me, and I'm so comfortable reading with it. However, you can't always know depending on where you are, but if I'm reading for friends or certain family members that I think they would appreciate a different deck, then I would swap it out. But for generally, and depending on where you are and how you know your audience, then I tend to go with an RWS. And then we've got, I don't know if I feel conflicted by this topic. I might be controversial here, but I'm not sure having my community represented in a deck would change my ability to read cards well or not. I think that's a valid point. So don't feel conflicted. Yeah, this is a safe space. It's good that we're talking about it. And yeah, I can read an RWS as well as, if not better, than some decks I'm less familiar with. So again, it's about your connection with the deck, isn't it? And then we've got Marilyn. I appreciate that there are tarot decks out there that appeal to everyone, no matter what their belief system or orientation is. Starry Eyed is watching from the beginning. That's okay. Trying to get the slider to go up. I don't want to miss any comments, but I've also got a couple of people waiting to come on. Isabel says, whatever the gender, the lovers are really representative of age or body shape. Really, as in rare. I want to see lovers as a relationship of caring, not just romance as well. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to pause reading the comments just to bring it in. Oh, I'll just read that one. This is quite a provocative topic, isn't it? I'd love for someone to go away and create a lover's card where they have Adam and Steve name as tags. Okay. So I said I would love it if a deck creator popped in, and we have the lovely Malamia. Hello. How are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, please don't mind my pillow, folks. As some of you know, I'm dealing with major medical stuff these days, so I'm reclining. But yes, Simon.
It's good to have you with us. However you appear, it's good to have you here.
I appreciate it. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, so you had some questions about from the perspective of a deck creator. Sorry, I'm on the bed and my little chihuahua was trying to run off, and he's not very good at jumping onto the floor. So I'm just trying to keep him safe here, buddy. So in terms of what it's like to create a deck, I mean, my first deck, Chakra Healing Tarot, was very diverse in some ways, and specifically in terms of people's backgrounds, as well as gender expression and sexuality. Now, you know, from the perspective of a creator, you know, because people are asking, like, you know, is there a lot of pressure? There may be a lot of pressure, but I mean, the fact is also when we're going to create a deck, and anyone who's created a deck will know this, and, you know, and it's not to be negative at all, but the reality is that there will, like, you can pour your heart and soul into creating a deck that, you know, is that you just know is going to help people, and it's going to, you know, be this beautiful source of healing and reflection for people. But the fact is that there will always be some people who just don't like it, or who will find something, you know, to take issue with it. And that's okay. I mean, that's actually why I think it's amazing there are so many decks, because I don't know that one single deck is going to be able to capture everything. Maybe it could, but I know from my perspective, when I created Chakra Healing Tarot, it was really important to me to have diversity in ways that you can depict through imagery in a way that made sense for the universe that I had created, but also in other ways, tried to very gently challenge some of our assumptions as well. You know, I've lived my life as someone with multiple neurodivergence as well as invisible disability. And so I have always appeared to be able-bodied while not having the advantage of being so, and particularly right now. And it's one of those things where if you're looking at the cards carefully, you might actually pick up on some of that. Like, well, why are we assuming that because there's like, for example, wheelchairs did not play into the universe for that deck. But is everybody standing? Is everybody doing something physical? Can you actually see everybody's limbs? Like, you know, so I think that there's always a time and a place for us to always also question our own assumptions into what we're reading into the images. And I do agree that I think that we all of us have so many internalized beliefs that we don't even realize we have. And so when you go to create art, is it natural to think about creating people who are older, for example? And then when you do, are you doing it in such a way that people will recognize that that's what you're doing? Are people recognizing when you do have a wide variety of ages, for example? So anyway, and I'm speaking about that deck in particular just because that there were humans in that deck. My newest deck only has, it doesn't have any humans in it. But, you know, I mean, I will say, you know, in Chakra Healing Tarot, about 2/3 of the cards had people who are racialized in some way. And I had a wide variety of people who are racialized, because as someone who is ambiguously racialized myself, that has been a very present reality for me my whole life, right? Very similar to some of the things that Cheryl was saying. And so anyway, I think I'm going on a tangent, but I wanted to share those ideas. But I don't know if I also missed a question you wanted to ask a creator.
No, I guess and you've kind of answered it. But if you're as a creative person, obviously it starts with inspiration. Everything starts with that thought and that kind of inspiration to create something. And then if you're creating something that already exists in terms of a system and a structure, you then start to think of, well, what can I add to this that exists 1,000 other times in other spheres? And you talked about creating your universe. But then I know you start off by saying I try to be diverse, but how, as a creator, how much in the world that we live in now, and with the conversations that's been happening particularly on the YouTube community over the last 5 or 6 years, how much influence or pressure do you feel that you want to create a deck that is your lived experience, B, you don't want to offend by getting something wrong, and does it kind of, how can I put it, does it impact on your creativity in terms of this is what I want to do, this is what I want to put out there? How much of that external factors from like conversations we're having or trying to get it right, does that play into it? That makes sense.
It does, yeah. I mean, I think, like, just in terms of pressure, and I mean, part of it is also I'm an autistic person, and so external pressure to me, like, that exists to a degree, but also between all of my experiences with othering and how I've navigated and survived that, how I personally as a creator respond to external pressure or expectations may be different from how, say, someone who's neurotypical as a creator may approach it. So I will say, in terms of expectations, maybe as opposed to pressure, I mean, it is clear that people want diverse decks. And you know, it can sometimes feel a bit weird when because I think sometimes people, they're communicating honestly and authentically, and sometimes people can come across as really critical about decks or cards, and like, for example, like, oh, well, why is there not a wheelchair in this deck? Or, why aren't there more images of people who are, in their 60s or whatever? So I do think it can feel difficult as a creator, because you're trying to create something that is within the system of the tarot. You're also trying to make sure that you are going with the creative inspiration that you get. And I think, from my perspective, it's how can I create something that is respectful, and while I'm confronting my own internalized biases, because it doesn't matter that I'm intersectional, I have internalized stuff too. Every single one of us does, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think I didn't take the approach of, okay, I've got a checklist and I need to have all these things. I didn't do that. What I knew is that I wanted the deck to be welcoming. And from that perspective, it felt like, okay, so I felt like I did a lot of things right in that perspective. But, if we're thinking about expectations, it would be really easy to get really discouraged by all of the, oh, but you know what? You didn't have enough people who looked like this. You didn't have enough people who looked like that. And especially, as a creator, we tend to be hard on ourselves. Like, the reason that we are creating and putting things out is that, we're pouring effort into these things. And especially for those of us who, it's not like a full-time gig. If we're doing this, off the side of our desk, so to speak, it does take a great deal of intensity, and we tend to be really hard on ourselves. And I think there's room for both. And I think there's room for both. You know, we can learn, we can do even better as we move forward. And there's also the recognition of, you know, I don't know if we can create a deck that, you know, could we create a deck that includes representation of absolutely everybody? Maybe we could. I mean, maybe that is possible. I think that that regardless, I'm glad that we exist in a time where there are so many different kinds of decks, because different decks will also resonate with different people for different reasons. Like, for example, I love the Wiser Tarot because it's a beautiful RWS. It's, you know, like traditional RWS, and there is just more representation in it. And I mean, the watercolor is beautiful also. And yeah. I mean, do I see myself in it? I don't happen to see myself in it, but I don't need to see myself in it. But I also recognize how much, especially in a world where so many of us have not seen ourselves represented in things, whether it's media, whether it's books, art, etc., how much people may really want that. And so I do hope that creators will continue to try to create work that is meaningfully diverse, while we also all, I think, as consumers, also, because, you know, I'm a consumer as much as I am a creator. I have lots of decks myself. Also, you know, think about it from the perspective of, you know, and I think some people have mentioned it in the comments about archetypes, you know, because there are in fact archetypes of the tarot. And I mean, even if I did not have a tarot deck with me, but I had pen and paper and I had enough paper, I could write out the names of every single card, tear it up, and now I have a tarot deck without any art. I could read from that. Like, I mean, and granted, I mean, I'm an experienced reader, so I could do that. But, you know, it's not to diminish the art so much as, you know, I think the art adds really important layers. But anyway, sorry, I'm going on a tangent again. I'm doing the neurodivergent thing. But all that is to say that I think that regardless of whether the expectations or pressures are related to diversity or other things, like, we creators, we hear it all. Like, people will, you know, leave comments or send messages, you know, like being really harsh on certain features that you've chosen for a deck, and it can sometimes feel impossible. It can sometimes feel really impossible. It's like, but everyone asked me to do this feature, and now someone's yelling at me because I did the feature, or someone asked me to change this thing, you know, in this next deck, and so I did that, and now all these people are mad at me that I did that. So sometimes it does feel a little bit impossible as a creator, because no matter what you do, and like, you know, we just try to take it in stride, but sometimes people are just really upfront.
A classic case is the Lightseers, you know, and how the original Lightseers, before the change of the Ten of Swords card, you know, the backlash, that for me, I think there's always an argument of intent versus impact. Now, the reason I had the discussion for this for me, it wasn't about how inclusive is it. It was more about feeling excluded. And I think if a creator, such as yourself or any other creator out there, is trying to be inclusive with good intentions and not box ticking and representing their lived experience, then kudos to them. And you can't please everybody. I totally get that. I think it's when a group is deliberately excluded that becomes problematic for me. But it might not for everybody else, because the counter argument to that is, well, that's just one deck. Get another deck that, you know, brings that need. We're not all fortunate enough to be able to buy multiple decks. You know, for some people, they might only ever have one deck. So that's a choice they're going to have to carefully consider as to what that one deck would be. But thank you, Melanie, for coming on, and you know, good luck with your recovery of your health as well, and long may you continue to gain strength and get better. So
very much appreciate it. Thank you.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, a couple of comments, and I'll bring in a final guest after this. So Adam says, I'm gay, but it's a very small part of who I am, and I don't look for it in tarot decks. However, I do think it's more realistic and relatable to include all of humanity in a tarot deck. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's what I was saying earlier, you know, because I always had the RWS or the 1JJ, and I didn't realize it didn't really feature that heavily. But then when I saw an additional card, I do remember having that sort of, oh, that's really nice. That's really nice that they've thought about me to include. We're not all black, white, gay, disabled, but we all age. Showing age in a deck reflects the broader common human experience. I agree. I think that and disability is still a marginalized group that is less represented. I think what's lacking in one deck, you'll find in plenty of other decks, especially now. It would be interesting to select about 5 decks and see how much of it is covered. That's a good point. Yeah. Again, it'll be which decks you would select, but yeah, getting that perspective over a few decks. I prefer decks as diverse as possible, but I don't think we should punish non-diverse decks. I agree, as it's every creator's vision of their orbit. They may not be intentionally excluding everyone. I agree totally, and that's the point I made about, you know, for me, it's not about not including everybody, because how can you? That would be a real task, and you would always invariably leave somebody out. But be true and authentic. And it's about when you just focus on one group, you'll exclude another. It is translating to all animal decks. Do we see ourselves in different members of the animal kingdom? Again, I think that brings in the comment that Malamia made about archetypes. You're representing archetypes of animals rather than necessary, get my words out, rather than just making it about people. There's quite a lot of comments. Scarlett's, I'm a fan of skeleton decks. Yeah, I mean, that strips it right back, doesn't it? I wonder if decks like my Labyrinth Tarot, because I can relate to the story and characters I know and dive into the imaginative world rather than reality. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's bring in our last guest, which take that off. Is Robin.
Hi.
I had a long wait. Sorry, Robin.
No, I'm so sorry. I planned to be here from the beginning, and I had a nap and I overslept. And then I woke up and found you. I thought, oh, what a great chance to partake in this discussion. I'm of a couple minds about this. I feel I like to see myself in a deck in terms of, I look at tarot as beings doing things. So I need to see a human being or a humanoid being of some kind doing an action. That's why I have trouble with animal decks or plant decks, herbal decks, whatever. And why I don't enjoy pip decks as much, because so many of the minors, I don't see a person doing something. On the other hand, like you said about the deck you showed earlier this morning, and another deck I have, if it's entirely one gender, I feel like it's marketed towards somebody else, that I'm excluded. And you know, if it's a mixture, RWS I have no trouble with, because my sense is, I mean, or my feeling is that souls don't have a gender, race, color, age. They're sort of like in between mode. And when I did my deck, I kind of tried to do that, you know, depicting something that doesn't have a gender or an age or a color. I mean, this sort of has a color because it's just a line on white background, but I don't think of it as having any kind of color. And I don't think of it as having a particular gender. To me, they're sort of like They could be ghosts, they could be babies, they could be aliens. Any of those things don't have any of those things we're talking about. And a lot of times, although some people say, well, it looks like you, so it's a boy. So I don't know. But I did sort of try to like have a being doing something without pinning it down to sex, gender, race, whatever.
And that was a conscious decision.
Yeah. Or maybe a subconscious one, because I created this deck so fast. I did it in one afternoon. So I don't know what I was thinking, but these were just like simple figures that were true to my aesthetic, and they happened to do that for me. I do know that a lot of times when people try to be inclusive, that I don't feel like they always accomplish it. A lot of times it feels tokenistic to me in a way. And I think I only have one deck in my collection that felt right, and that's the Mara Loon Tarot. And I don't know why I feel that one is right. It feels completely natural and comfortable. It doesn't feel like somebody sat and pondered, well, I'm going to pick this for this card and that for that card. But when I think about creating a diverse deck, I think, well, I'm an aging, white, cis, gay male. Who am I to decide which category gets which archetype, and isn't that sort of judgmental? Or no matter how, what's the word? How I'm trying not to be assign something to one person, or not have that on my mind, or just do it randomly. Somehow that's always in there if I've made a choice. And so that kind of bothers me. But yeah, I'm losing my train of thought. Last time I was on, I made a little list of all the things I wanted to say. But yeah.
Can I just pick up on something then while you're thinking about that? So you started off by saying that, and I get that about like plant tarots. I tend to give all that kind of, I don't mind them so much in oracle decks, but for tarots decks representing archetypes, not so much. I can get around it with animals if they're kind of, like you said, humanoid and they're kind of doing stuff. You talked about, for you, it was more important about seeing the figures in the cards in action, So, and I didn't jump in at the time, but I think what my mind was thinking of. So, are you saying that it's irrespective of who that person are or what they represent, as long as it's a person that's doing? For you, it's more about the act in the card, the action that they're performing in the card, less about what they look like or what background they represent.
Exactly. From a soul point of view, I can jump into a young female card. That can be me, depending on what they're doing. I can relate to that. I feel like I've got all of those sides or aspects within my soul somehow. In some way, I can relate to that, the action of that card. Well, here's another example. There was a deck that came out that had 2 cards of people missing or that had artificial limbs. And both cards depicted them as overachievers. And that just kind of like, why do they have to achieve more than a fully abled person to be in this deck? One of them would make the point, but 2 of them doing that, it sort of suggests that everybody who has that disability or lack of ability or special ability or whatever has to be the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I get as somebody who works with people with disabilities, and I see the barriers, the additional barriers they have to overcome, I can understand why somebody might say overachiever. I don't think it's overachiever. It's achieving against all the odds. However, like most groups, within those groups there is a diversity as well, and this is what we talk about when we talk about intersectionality. People with disabilities can be people of color, can have a different religious background, can have a different sexual orientation. It's just because somebody is identifying predominantly as one kind of characteristic. Nobody is one characteristic. We're all multifaceted, and we've all got many different diversities. So yeah, I take your point. Seeing disabled people again, that's what I loved about Poppy's deck. Seeing somebody with a learning difficulty, could only tell from the facial expression, but was just engaged in an everyday, looked like an apprenticeship kind of role, everyday act of hammering a nail, I think it was, or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's up there at the minute. Yeah, go on.
Also, it's funny, decks that are portraiture, where there's not an action, it's just somebody in a picture facing you, doesn't quite do it for me either, because there's the only action we have is they're looking at us or they're sitting there. So that's a less workable deck for me, because it's lacking that element. But I am getting more into decks where I tend to read from the label rather than the image. It doesn't mean to say I don't want any images. I still like the images or the representation of humanoid or human being, people being something, doing something. But I'm getting more comfortable with it not having to be that specific in terms of seeing that.
Going back to when I was talking about validation, if you don't mind me asking you, so you're saying you was a cis white male of a certain age and part of the LGBT community. When you see older people in tarot decks, or particularly older gay males, does it foster a sense of belonging or acceptance into the club of tarot?
It's funny. No, I think, when I see that, I think, isn't that nice that the people that care about that will feel part of it? But it doesn't affect me personally one way or the other. But I think I see it and I think, the gay people will appreciate this. The older people will appreciate this. But it's like, for me, it's not that I appreciate it more. And sometimes I feel like, that's a condescending nod in my direction,
Who are they to do that?
Yeah.
But do you think that might be as well, Robin, because you, like me, discovered the tarot a long time ago, and there wasn't that diversity there, so we kind of become accustomed to the tarot being a certain way.
Well, that's another bugaboo I have. Yes, I remember the RWS back from the 70s. And it's like I adapt my mind to the tarot. I don't force the tarot to adapt itself to me. So it's like, and I'm used to, and people complain about the court cards. Well, that was sort of set in medieval times, and we don't have knights and pages and kings and queens anymore, should they even be in the deck. And it's like, well, that school of tarot was established that way, so I adjust myself to what that system is. I don't say, gee, I wish that wasn't there, why don't they update it so I fit into that. I fit myself into it. It's like if I go to a foreign language, I don't make them expect them to speak English. I attempt to speak whatever I can of their language. I try to fit into that culture rather than make it. And I do get really kind of little overly maybe upset about decks that are traditional old ones that were created a certain way that have been updated to be more diverse or inclusive, because they haven't gotten the permission from the original creator to do that. And it just feels presumptuous to me, and sort of like kind of like defacing their decks or something. It wasn't their intent. It wasn't in their thought within that time or era. And everything we do now that seems politically incorrect or whatever, it's all based on what was the norm or the context of the time. And maybe that's why, decks are more diverse now, because we have social media. People are able to express their concerns more, and people make changes accordingly, I guess. But it's like, I don't quite understand if people can see an old RWS deck and can't appreciate it for what it is without making changes to the characters involved in the deck.
Yeah. I think sometimes, I know Wiser Tarot was mentioned earlier. I think it was by Cheryl. I love that deck, but that got criticism too, because there were people saying, well, actually, all they've done is change the skin color. It's so much more than changing skin color. It's about facial features and everything else. So again, if you're going to do that and make that statement, I think it should be done from the proper intention of why you're doing it, and consultation and talking to people, and perhaps bringing in artists from those backgrounds that you're wanting to represent, and that's what's key. But
also, I haven't heard of this being done yet, but I wouldn't so much blame a creator for not being inclusive. I would say, how come publishers don't have teams of people that are diverse? I think it would be good for a team to sit down together, representing all the facets of that diversity, to decide on a consensus basis, who gets which archetype and what do they look like, and then it would feel a little bit more balanced. But if a woman creates an all-male deck or a man creates an all-female deck, it's just like, who are you to make those decisions? Your head might be in the right place. You may be trying to do good, but why are you taking the power to make those assumptions and decisions?
Exactly. And that reminds me of not where I work now, but I work in an old job where I worked at. And I was the Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Manager, EDI Manager, it was called. And I was asked to go onto an interview panel. And there was a bit of an issue in this place where, it wasn't very diverse, and it should have been for the location that it was in. And when I looked at the interview panel, I said, I'm not joining this panel unless the interview panel changed, because we're all white males, and I think if you don't have a recruitment and selection process that is made up from various backgrounds, then there is that unconscious bias that could play out, or similar to me bias, where you give opportunities to people that are similar to you. So it's similar to what you're saying. If you've got the people that are representative of what you're trying to achieve, then you're more likely to achieve it. Thank you, Robin. Really appreciate you stopping by. Always like hearing your thoughts. So thanks for sharing with us today. I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah.
Take care. Okay, couple of comments before we wrap up, because we've just gone over time. The reason Lightseers, and this might hurt, resonated with a large cohort was because they felt natural with their inclusion. So natural that it wasn't even questioned. And I think that's what's key, isn't it? Where you don't have to it's just there. It's just representative without. You can look at some decks and just think, oh, they've tried really hard, but they've missed the mark. And again, I know I keep referencing Poppy Palin's, but that was one of the first decks that I thought, you know, this is just so well done, so representative, but she hadn't tried to be representative, and now everything's just jumped. So I don't know where I got up to. Let's have a look. Saw that one about skeleton decks. Here we are, back to where I was. Chat jumps really fast. So true, Cheryl. It felt very genuine and a good representation of a lot of races, ages, and sexual orientations. I like the tarot characters not to be like me, but external archetypes that can inform me and bring in new information, even if the line between subjective and objective is blurred. People agreeing with Robin's comments. And then we all have infinite energy at the end of the day, light orbiting through infinity, having a physical experience in body, excuse me, a body we should love, but not be totally identified with as we're so much. I've read that totally wrong. We all, gosh, it's getting late. My ADD brain is kicking in. We are all infinite energy at the end of the day, light orbiting through infinity, having a physical experience in a body we should all love, but not be totally identified with as we are so much more. Santa Marta Tarot. Yeah. It appears to me that in Robin's deck, it's the spirit within the human experience. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've got Robin's deck. He was kind enough to send it to me. And I just seen it as a person. I did see it as a human form. But I don't know in my mind if I assigned a gender to it or not, or a race to it or anything like that. I just saw it as a simple outline of a human. Marketing and what's publishable today is a big part of what decks we get. The decks we buy dictates the decks we get. Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, I had a discussion a few years ago talking about representation, and was saying that, you know, as a community, we've been able to bring around borderless cards, thicker card stock. We've been able to bring around matte instead of gloss. Our words influence publishers. So, you know, then we started talking about diversity and the need for diversity, and now we're seeing more diverse decks. Thank you, Isabel. Glad you enjoyed it. I think it has to do with the archetype for a particular card. If a disabled person, the card expands the archetype meaning, then it should work. Fair point. Okay, I'm just going to scroll down to see if there's anything. Vanessa says, thinking of the difference between how men represent women artistically and how women represent women, you can usually tell. That's interesting. No matter how diverse a publisher's staff is, they'll make their decision based on profit. It depends if the staff are representative, because yes, it comes down to, and in business, it comes down to the bottom line, it comes down to profits. But if there's a shift in attitude, and if there's a shift in what the consumer demands, then ultimately they'll be thinking about their bottom line. Here's a comment. sorry I'm so behind, but when I'm chatting, I'm absorbed in what the person's saying. I will always put RWS above all other decks, but I wonder if that's because I grew up with it. It's familiar. I'm exactly the same, Trisha, because I'm white, straight, and able-bodied passing. I've always been able to see myself in it. Yeah, there's certain. I don't know if I've ever looked at the RWS and thought, I see myself in this deck. I think this only came about for me when I think I'm being excluded from a deck, that it's then, you know, formed those thoughts. There's something wrong with this scroller today. I'd be interested to hear what people think about the heterosexual relationships index in the Druidcraft, where the male-female balance is part of creation. Should this change in future? Males and females in creation is old as time. I don't necessarily think the Druidcraft needs to change. The Druidcraft is the Druidcraft. But you've said light Druidcraft, etc. It's a good question. I think, you know, heterosexual relationships are valid and genuine relationships, like any other relationship. I think I go back to like Becca's point about how nice it is to offer alternatives rather than change, offer alternatives. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up just because of the time and I've not eaten yet. And what should we pull? What deck? Let's grab this one. Yeah, and I need to do a card pull. But thank you to everybody who has everybody who's popped in tonight, everybody who's contributed to the discussion. It's been a good discussion, lots of varying viewpoints, which is great. I just want to emphasize as well, and if there's anybody watching this back and they leave comments, that this is a space where people can share their views. As somebody who's worked in this arena for many years before the Equality Act, the only way you change hearts and minds is by allowing a space for people to talk. It's okay to challenge if we challenge respectfully. Everybody who shared their thoughts are sharing their views and should be respected for that. Nobody said anything that was, in my opinion anyway, offensive or problematic. So yeah, I hope that the comments that are left, you know, are just as engaging and thought-provoking and offers something for us to consider and ponder. Okay, so our card for the week. Oh, we have the 8 of Swords. The deck that I've used, by the way, is the Marseille Waite. Just the Marseille Waite, isn't it? By Alejandro Rosa. And I forgot his name then. So our message for the week then is maybe at this time there are some of us who are feeling quite trapped by a certain situation, or maybe feeling that a sense of freedom is lacking. You know, very often we might find ourselves in a situation where there's a certain way we want to go, there's a certain freedom that we crave, but there's a situation that we find ourselves in where we are prevented from going in the direction we want to go, or taking that step that we want to take. What we have to remember about this particular card is that it's the sword suit, it's the air suit, and what it indicates is very often we are trapped because of our own making. And a lot of the times it's about the fact that we can't see the wood for the trees. That's why you've got somebody here with a blindfold on, and we are very much in our own headspace. And that sense of feeling trapped is because we don't have the clarity or the foresight to be able to break off those shackles, those ropes that bind us. We've built up a situation in our mind that over time has made us feel like there is no escape, there is no freedom. So the message, I think, is for this week is to focus, to really focus and find clarity, because it's when we find that clarity that we can then see that blindfold comes off and we can see the way forward, the way out of our self-imposed prison. No one's going to come and rescue us. We have to. The Eight of Swords reminds us that we have to be the ones to work out what's going on and to find that focus and to find that clarity to be able to move forward. All right. I will pop that up in the Hermit's Cave following this live. Thank you again to everybody that's been here. It's been a fab discussion. I won't be on next Saturday because I've got Sandra staying for a few days and we're out and about and doing things, which will be fun. I will be on tomorrow, not live, but to do a walkthrough of Alice in Wonderland. So I've not done that yet. And then there's one more deck to come, and then I think I'm gonna have a break for a while because there's been a video a day more or less for the last 3 weeks. So I think I'm gonna have a little bit of a break. I'm sure you won't mind. You'll probably be relieved. But yeah, thanks for being here, everyone, and until next time, go in peace. Namaste and blessed be.